Welcome.
Hello.
We're here today with Molly Elmore, and I recently came across some of your videos, Molly, on YouTube, and just found I really resonated with a lot of the things that you were sharing with your audience. And I reached out to Molly, and she so graciously accepted an invitation to do a conversation here today. So we're really happy to have you.
Thanks for having me, Dina. It's nice to meet you.
Thanks. So I was wondering if you could just tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got involved in doing videos on YouTube and how your path led you to do that and interview other people and share this information.
Sure. So my journey to kind of where I am now with the stuff that I talk about kind of started a couple of years ago when I was a business coach. And I was charging what I thought was a lot of money for these services. And I was coaching other business owners. And I realized a lot of us had these weird mental things with money, like that people that had more money were better than us. And I can't charge a lot of amount because, I'm not good enough, like all these sort of weird things that people have about money. And someone suggested to me, you know what? Read this book called The Creature from Jekyll Island. You will find out that the whole money thing is made up and all these hangups you have about money, they'll go away. Now, that didn't totally happen, but this book, changed my life in a shocking way. And then I learned so many things. I almost had a hard time getting through it and believing it because it just challenged so many beliefs that I'd had my whole life. So I still was business coach. Everything's fine. I have this weird thing now in my head about the money thing, but I continue to run. I had two businesses at the time. And then March 2020 comes.
Where were you running those businesses? From what state, what part of the United States?
I live in Georgia, about an hour north of Atlanta, in a cute little mountain town. And I had a soap making business where we made all sorts of bath and body products. And then I was a business coach to other soap and bath products makers. So I was totally in this small scale producer world. We were manufacturing, which is really hard to do profitably. And then 2020 comes and a lot of the stores that we sold in were shut down. And that started this sort of new era for me where I was like, wait a minute, this is not cool. You can't just decide some businesses get to stay open and other businesses get to close. I'm a small business advocate and coach. Like, I'm going to fight for our right to support our families. And you're not going to decide for me that my business is not essential. If that money feeds my family, it's essential. Like, you don't get to decide that.
Right.
And that ended up segued me into learning more about money, which is where the kind of crypto space came in. And I learned about I went down the whole list. We started with Bitcoin. I went through Ethereum and Solana and Phantom and all of them. And it was funny because when I was in like a coaching program about crypto, and the coach I was working with told me to skip XRP. He goes, that one, don't worry about that one. Just go through all the rest of them, which I did. But I still was like, I got to finish this list. And I decided to do the XRP deep dive this process that I had. And I immediately found two really weird things about XRP. Number one, I found this ETHgate scandal, which I was like, wait a minute, none of these other cryptos have like scandals, like how juicy. And then two, I found this thing called the XRP buyback. And I was like, what on earth is this weird world? So different than Phantom and Luna and, all these other ones. So I became instantly like, there is more to this story here than it appears on the surface level. Okay. And that started this whole new trajectory for me where I started writing Twitter threads about economic principles, ETHgate, XRP buyback, and I ended up connecting with a lot of other people in that world. And meanwhile, I got kicked off Facebook for posting a meme.
Okay, been there too.
And it scared me because at the time I was selling all the business coaching and the crypto coaching was all done through a funnel and Facebook groups and all that stuff. Yep, and so when you take that away, I was like, wait a minute. So I go to Twitter, which turned out to be the greatest thing. I'm over Facebook, but I got scared that what if this happens on Twitter and I build up this big following and I get kicked off Twitter? So that's actually the real reason I started the YouTube channel, was just to have a backup plan for Twitter. Oh. And then I started making these videos about all these topics, XRP, economic principles. It didn't initially start out as anything that like truther related, but that's where it naturally goes.
Okay.
And I found that the videos actually resonated with people probably as well, if not more than the Twitter threads did.
Okay. I have
And
a
then
few questions from all the
yeah,
things you said already.
sure.
First off, going back to the book, working as a nurse, and I was trading, I was day trading the markets, and just talking to a client, and not a client, but a patient who I was seeing that day that was involved in finance. And he said to me, "You have to read this book." And he came back like weeks later and left the book for me. It was on my desk when I came back to work. And I was like, oh my God, I'll never get through this book. What is this? But I had already started an awakening path as well, and read the book the same way as you. And it just blew my mind. It was difficult to get through. It was challenging all the different, lies that I had believed and things like that. But I wanted to ask you about when you were working with a coach, was that just somebody you found through your business, or was that someone you sought out to help you with your financial situation at that time?
So I was a business coach. I still am kind of, but not most of the time. And I joined a program with all other business coaches. So I know a ton of coaches.
Okay.
And then when 2020 happened and I closed my businesses, long story there, but I ended up going to work as a coach for another coach in a large program. And I had about 250 clients during the year and a half I worked there. I know a ton of coaches
Okay.
from just my working. And one of the coaches that I was actually friends with started a crypto education program. And I was like, hey, I realized I don't know anything about this stuff. It's interesting.
Okay.
And I trusted him and knew him and joined his program. So what I love about the coaching world is we're sort of taking back education and saying that we can teach each other. We
That's
can
right.
learn, master something, and then teach to our peers. It's way faster. Like academia can't keep up with
That's right.
technology. And two, there's an agenda in academia. They don't teach entrepreneurship in schools for a reason.
No way.
They don't teach you financial independence in schools. They don't really want that. So
That's
the
right.
coaching world, it's also includes courses. There's the subtle differences between coaching and being a course creator. But the idea is that we're going to decentralize education. We're going to take it back and not require people to go through a government-controlled education system that, one, isn't good at teaching technology, and two, doesn't really want people to be financially successful or independent.
Yep. Totally agree with you in the enslaved system of education and other sectors of our society. So would you say that your awakening path began in 2020 with that whole situation that you just explained?
I mean, yes, that was like the big one for me. And what happened was I got warned in January of 2020 that I wasn't going to be able to get ingredients for the soap business from China. Like we've ordered all the bottles and jars from China. And in January, a friend of mine who's connected with the military was like, just so you know, like this isn't a joke. This could be very serious. If you need to buy stuff, you need to do it now. And I was like, what?
Wow.
And then he was right. I was like, ooh, wow. And then all these businesses were shut down. And he had a Facebook group at the time where he was helping lots of people awaken. And he sent me this spreadsheet that had 14,000 rows in it of all of the Q drops decoded.
Oh.
And he was like, here you go. I was like, what's this? And I spent months that summer
Sleepless nights
going through them all and being like, what? And it was probably as illuminating as Creature from Jekyll Island, with just some more current things. That book doesn't really cover a whole lot of history after like the 70s, 80s, but this spreadsheet had a lot of stuff about like Las Vegas and 9/11 and all these sort of things that I was like, whoa. So that summer of 2020, without a doubt, was my great awakening, where the veil was lifted and the extent of current corruption became clear. Because Jekyll Island's great for teaching about history and how this stuff's been going a long time, but it's kind of easy to think, well, that all stuff happened in the past. Like we don't have that anymore. And that's what that spreadsheet told me was, yes, this is going on now. And it wasn't really much about the predictions that all those drops had, as much as someone went to great lengths to decode what these historical references were, which was really what my awakening was about.
Can I ask you something about the Q drops?
Sure.
Do you believe it's a psyop, or do you believe, in other words, do you believe they released these Q drops because they wanted people to awaken?
I think that could still be a psyop. I mean, it was an operation to psychologically affect people. Now, whether it's like some supercomputer that is part of the Department of Energy, like, I'm not sure. I don't know who the people, it's like Satoshi Nakamoto, like, I
Right.
don't necessarily know who they are. I don't think it was intended to like not awaken people, because it certainly created this movement. Now, I do think, though, that the controlled opposition hijacked that movement and tried to discredit it with some drama and make it seem like anybody who had read this stuff was now some sort of fringe crazy person, right?
Right.
And you can kind of tell when anytime anybody refers to it as QAnon, we're like, that's not a thing. And anybody in the groups when those labels first came out was educated that just be careful. The media's made up this label to try to like make everyone sound loony. But in terms of whether I do think that it was intentionally done to create this group of almost influencers who could go out and educate our peers, our friends, our family about some of this stuff.
Us being two of them.
Correct. Yeah.
So where did your awakening take you from there? So now this happens with your business and it starts to blow open. Where did that lead you to from there?
I initially became naively optimistic that Bitcoin was kind of this answer. Like, okay, well, if the dollar system is so corrupt and it's part of this cartel and the banking system, we need to get out. And I was like, and then the first thing in front of you is like, well, look at this magical Bitcoin created by this anonymous superhero, came out of nowhere and gave us this gift. And I'm a marketer. I mean, a lot of the business coaching stuff I teach is about marketing. I've written lots of copy. It's too perfect of a story. Like, it's real life is messy. And this Satoshi story is just too beautifully, perfectly timed, almost like, just like the Patriot Act, like it was ready just for the perfect crisis to introduce this savior to people who wanted to escape the money system. So now I actually think that Bitcoin was really to keep people out of gold, because when the 2009 crisis happened and people were mad about all of the money printing that happened, the logical thing you would have done at that time is, especially if you're a young guy, techie, libertarian with money, it would have created, I think, a big movement to get into gold. But instead, they pushed everybody to digital gold, Bitcoin, better than gold. Gold is so heavy to move around. We need a better solution than that clunky metal that's been money since the beginning of time. Let's create a new one and have this digital scarcity idea and all these. There's also some very serious money, I think, in Bitcoin marketing, which, if it were truly an organic, decentralized thing, it would be kind of chaotic and not really very well organized.
Exactly.
Bitcoin is well managed and organized. So that was sort of where I started. And I didn't become awake to the strangeness of Bitcoin for like a year. Like, I thought Bitcoin was awesome. And all the other cryptos were all, let's be our own bank. Let's do this DeFi thing. So I had to go through this process of learning about all those before I was like, just sounds too perfectly packaged for this to genuinely be like a renegade rebellion movement.
That's right. And it in a perfect world. And yet it had its purposes.
Correct.
And look at the timing of when it was released during the 2008, world financial crisis. And so obviously you're a gold buff too. You believe in gold as real money. And silver. I
believe in silver. I think silver has a challenge, though, in terms of revaluation, and that it's used a lot in industry. Lots, like all of our electronics use silver. So if silver were to price correct like 20x, it's going to create a problem for manufacturing. So gold is also used as well. I'm actually a big believer that the next financial system is going to have a variety of assets become backing for money. It won't. So even if I say we're going back to a gold standard, that's actually a euphemism for asset-backed money. Gold, silver, oil, diamonds, palladium, like any resource that a country produces, even products, could become backing for the money system.
So I've listened to some of your ideas and some of your interviews about possibly where we could be going with this whole monetary system breakdown in the world and reset.
Mm-hmm.
And we know we're moving into a commodity super cycle right now, which lines up with what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
So would you see the other nations of the world as we go into CBDCs, right? Would you see them backing their central bank digital currency by resources, by the commodities that are rich in their nations?
I think they've already done that.
Okay.
It looks at surface level like there's this sort of the BRICS countries versus the US, and we have this war against the dollar. And it makes, as an American, you hear that and you're like, the rest of the world hates us. Like, we're at war with these countries. But the thing you have to remember from Creechel from Jekyll Island is that, and he didn't really get into this that much, but the United States is a corporation, and it is a subsidiary of the City of London, which is also a corporation. City of London, one of their products is the Federal Reserve note, and they have used that product to weaponize producers, colonies, whose resources have been exploited for hundreds and hundreds of years. So the resource producing countries of the world are rebelling actually against the City of London. They're not rebelling against us. They want out of this colony system. They don't want to be basically producing all this stuff just to give it to these European banking cartel people. The Prime Minister of Italy, Giorgia Meloni, has a great video from 2019 where she exposes the scam that the French have done with some of these countries in Africa, like Burkina Faso, and that they manage the currency, and they have this thing called seigneurage, French word, where for every like dollar equivalent in Burkina Faso that is kind of created, 50 cents of it goes to the French government. Like, their money is taxed, like in the process of creating it, which enslaves these poor nations from ever being able to be prosperous. That's the racket I see the BRICS nations and these asset producing countries. They're fighting against this colonial system where they've just been exploited for. And honestly, the United States is also a colony. Canada's a colony, Australia's a colony, New Zealand's a colony. We're all up in colonies of the crown. And I think finally we're seeing the actual Revolutionary War, which didn't end the way we were taught in school. This is what I see playing out. And it's going to require a move back to money that's physical, that is backed by something other than the strength and power and good credit of the United States, aka the military.
Most Americans don't even know this. We don't learn this in school, and we're under the military industrial complex, which I really hail your courage to speak about the military and the military industrial complex and what that really is. I haven't been as courageous to do that online. But being we know that this is really what's been going on, Americans are just beginning to awaken to the idea that, wow, we've really suppressed other nations with the weaponry of our currency. And obviously, we know the Fed has just printed, every time we ran out of money, all they had to do was print more notes. And these other nations being suppressed and really working hard for what they produced and sent to the US have to keep working so hard to gain those dollars. And now we know that a lot of these nations hold a lot of our debt. Do you believe that they will begin dumping? I know they already have begun. Do you think there's going to be a big dump? And I know you did a video on this.
Sandman?
Yep. Do you think there'll be a big dump of US Treasuries coming?
Yeah. There's one thing I want to preface, though. Another thing that we were told by the media that's actually not really accurate. I'm no fan of the Fed. I'm not a fan of central banks in general. But the majority of the dollars that are floating around the world were created via what's called the Eurodollar system, which has nothing to do with Europe or the euro currency. These are simply banks that exist outside of the United States that fractionally reserve lending, meaning let's say I'm Credit Suisse in Switzerland, you deposit $1 million into my account, I can turn around and issue $100 million worth of loans. And the Fed, or the central bank of the US banking system, has no authority over all of these banks outside the United States, but the European oligarchs own most of them. So they've had this money printing thing that has nothing to do with the Fed for ages. and they can print as much money as they want. A lot of these banks are in the Caribbean. You hear about these like Cayman Island banks and all that stuff. They have been using those banks to fund all their like New World Order, like Great Reset stuff. And the great economist, Tom Luongo, has really enlightened me on this, that the current people running the Fed, meaning specifically Jerome Powell, they're actually American patriots, and they have been raising interest rates to break this Eurodollar market so that these European oligarchs run out of money for their like dystopian New World Order thing that they're trying to push all of us into. To manage the media globally is expensive. To pay off all these politicians is expensive. To threaten and extort people, all that stuff requires a lot of money. And if the only way to bankrupt them is to take out those banks. So that's why we are likely going to see the collapse of some serious banks in Europe as the sort of US patriot movement tries to collapse the Eurodollar market, which is also tied to FTX. FTX was also part of this offshore dollar printing. FTX had the ability to take government money and fractionally lend it, like they created new dollars out of nothing, and they paid off all these people. It was a giant money laundering scheme, and that's why FTX was also removed, in my opinion.
Do you feel like Deutsche Bank will be the next big European bank to go down?
Probably, because they own, I mean, their exposure to the derivatives market, which is like a 2.4 quadrillion thing. You take out Deutsche Bank, you take out derivatives.
Whoa.
Now, what I don't necessarily know is how much cartel money printing was going on at Deutsche Bank. I'm under the impression that Credit Suisse was part of that. And a lot of these Swiss banks, I mean, Switzerland's a fascinating rabbit hole in itself. Why does this one country get to be neutral? And all the people store their money there. And there's all these tunnels under Switzerland that connect all parts of Europe. And then you have CERN, which is another weird, bizarre thing.
Yeah.
And there's this real strong connection with sort of Nazis in Switzerland. So to me, the Swiss banks are probably higher on the likelihood of being taken out than necessarily this German bank. So it looks like Deutsche Bank will be the one to fall, because there's been a lot of FUD around that, but we'll see if that's one. I'd expect more Caribbean banks. Also, some of these banks have been closing and they're not even telling us. Like, if they're not like a name brand one or getting a lot of media coverage like Silicon Valley Bank did, then I'd expect some of these smaller money printers to just disappear and we don't even necessarily know much about it. Like, I don't know a lot of banks in the Caribbean. So if you told me one closed, I'd be like, I never heard of it anyway.
And weren't the Caribbean banks the first to really adopt CBDC?
I think they did a lot of testing, like in the Bahamas. They are testing some of those things. I don't know if they've gotten the outcome that they wanted. I don't know if the Bahamian sand dollar has been accepted by the people. CBDCs are interesting because there's two kinds, right? There's a wholesale CBDC, which is how banks send money to other banks. I don't have any concerns about that. I think we already see CBDCs wholesale in place. The question then becomes these retail CBDCs, which it looks from what the ECB has said, we'll see one in Europe. And that's the dystopian one where like they can program your money and connect it to social credit scores and you won't be able to drive your car and the like carbon credit limit, that kind of thing. The only thing that I remember very clearly is when Obamacare came out and what a mess that was and how nobody could really, there was like one database for like healthcare and it was just such a fiasco. So to think that the European government, which isn't even a country, like Europe is a collection of countries. So these people who are managing Europe are somehow going to build the most sophisticated database in the world that connects in real time the money system, social credit system, some sort of carbon allowance. From a technology standpoint, that would be an incredible technological accomplishment. I don't think they have it. Now, we've been told also by the media that China has this system already. They've had, and so I did videos on this. Actually spoke to some people who live in China, and they're like, that's not true. China doesn't have this countrywide system that connects money, social credit scores, and anything else, even like the health stuff. That doesn't exist. They have a CBDC that most people aren't using. They have private companies that have social credit scores like our Facebook, but And they have health pass where governments can turn that off like they did in this one region when there was like a bank run. But it's not all connected in one thing. It's too many people, 1 billion people in China. They don't have, it's too hard. It's really hard to build this thing that they've scared us. And so I went through all these articles, and when you actually get beyond the headline and read the article, you find out that they're saying, oh, this one city's state government has this thing.
Okay.
The real dystopian stuff in China that has happened is the Chinese government has been trying to crack down corruption at the local level. That's who's been getting hit, are these like local mayors who take the government money and go on vacation with it. That's where the social credit score stuff has also been implemented by the government. If you are spending government money as a government employee, you have to prove, like, there's restrictions on what you can spend that money on, which makes sense to me. Like, if I've worked for companies where I have like a travel budget, like I'm not allowed to just buy whatever I want with my travel budget. You
Right.
have to have some parameters. So the media has been spinning it to create this fear, which in my take is they want us to think that this system is inevitable, that it's already running in China, it's coming into Europe, it's going to come to the United States. And what happens is people just resign to that fact. Or if you want to get a little woo-woo, we literally manifest that happening.
That's
So
one of my questions was going to be like, do you really believe there is this enemy? Because there's people who are speaking out and saying there really is no enemy. It's like, it's what we create through our own consciousness. What's your belief?
I agree that we can be our own worst enemy. And in this case, I mean, think about it. For most of us, and I learned this a lot with business coaching, like the biggest problem most entrepreneurs at least have is their own fear, their own like reluctance to do things, or to ask for something and be told no, or to make a video and bumble their words, like all the stuff that business owners generally need to do to be successful. Their own mind and fear is the number one barrier. Worry, which I worry a lot, worry is like faith in the negative outcome. Think about how much time a lot of us spend worrying about stuff that never happens. So yes, I think that collectively as society, we have manifested a lot of negative things without realizing it. So I'm not trying to blame anyone or blame us, but the empowering side about that is that if we have created all of these dark things, we can create something else, and we can create a much more positive future. If we all decide we want this future, and I'm going to look towards this future and make decisions that align with that good outcome and move into more of like a Nasara post reset abundance. We have no more cartel, we have no more programming that tells us, we should just stay slaves in our little prison system, that we want to be free.
I have a few questions. So, do you believe that the XRP, I listened to your, occult video about XRP, and, people can look at the dark side of that. And
Right.
Obviously we know occult means just hidden. It's just hidden knowledge. It's hidden understanding. But some believe XRP is not decentralized at all, that it's going to enslave us. And, just the things you're talking about, how the governments are going to continue to use XRP as a means of control. What's your thoughts on that involved with XRP?
I don't think governments will use XRP for control at all. XRP is an open blockchain. There are some interesting theories that the XRP ledger itself is not of this world. And that
what does that mean?
Meaning it maybe didn't come from Earth people, humans.
And it was kind of downloaded by aliens.
That's where, you could be some kind of spiritual, like, inspiration. It could be some off-world entity. This is where the rabbit holes get truly fascinating.
Wow.
Never
heard that one.
Yeah, I haven't put it in any of my videos. Here it's in your video. Because it's hard to prove. Like, I can't prove it. Like, this is
Right.
Other people who are more knowledgeable than me have talked to me about that, Earth, we're not alone in this galaxy. It's kind of naive to think that. And so the current sort of thinking that I've been taught is there are many planets out there, and some of these planets have humans on them that just are culturally different than us, but like physically very similar. They're more advanced technologically, and maybe one of these groups created this for us so that we've been living in this sort of slavery system without realizing it. Think about how many people work some like grinding 9 to 5 job, barely paid to paycheck to paycheck, barely surviving, eating poisonous garbage food, depressed all the time, like just over medicating because your life sucks. And you just kind of, it's a slave system. Like no one's really free in that world. And I get it. I'm kind of still part of it, trying to break out of it.
Right.
So the idea was that XRP was a gift to help
Wow.
us be free from this system that, unfortunately, the dollar is sort of the currency of the cartel system. Yeah, I can't really prove this otherworldly thing. It's been told to me. The first time I heard it, I was like, what are you talking about? But I've now heard it so many times, I forget that like it's not common knowledge.
Well, I'm glad we touched on that because I come from a more spiritual background, biblical, Christian. I don't know what your background is as far as religion's concerned, but I'm on an awakening also out of religion.
I think much of religion, especially organized religion, has been used as a tool to control people.
I agree.
It also teaches you one thing you asked me before about this sort of, are there enemies or whatever type things? One thing that's kind of related to religion is most religions teach us that we have to do all these things now for a reward in a very future situation. So kind of have to suck it up and sacrifice enjoying today, knowing that after you die, great things will happen, which of course, no one can really verify that, can't really prove it. This isn't just a Christian thing. Other religions have the same sort of idea. And I think that's the matrix programming, is that you're free now. You can do whatever you want now. I'm also not really a fan of rules. Like just kind of as a kid, there was a lot of rules. I didn't like them, rebelled against them. So anytime as an adult, somebody gives me a bunch of rules, I'm like, you better be paying me a lot, or I'm going to figure out a way around this rule. And I didn't grow up in a religious family, but I have started kind of doing a Christian thing as an adult. And I kept getting hung up. I'm like, you got a whole bunch of rules in here. Like, I thought that this was supposed to be God loves me and wants great things for me, but there's all these conditions. Some of these conditions I'm not okay with. One of which being do all these things. Now, this is sort of more Old Testament stuff, but like do all these things. And a lot of them are moral kind. Like, I get it. Don't hurt people and don't like lie and steal. Like, I have no problem with ethics, but there's some rules that seem oppressive to me. Like they're trying to manipulate you into a system where you just do what you're told and you're not free. And I'm now a big fan of the path where I can truly be free. I'm not accountable to anything other than what I choose to be accountable to. And I can spend my time doing what I want instead of having to get in, like, let's not even go into the tax system, but like, you can't really just not work because you got to pay for stuff. And then if you got to pay for stuff, you got to pay taxes, and like, just creates this whole matrix prison system that I'm not a fan of.
Do you feel like, I have so many questions for you, but getting back to the spiritual thing, did that lead you down a more awakening path of becoming freer as, in your spirit, in your soul? Did it lead you to soul healing or soul path where you sought a better existence here in this earth?
So some of this stuff has actually been fairly recent. I'd say in the last like 3 or 4 months. So when I told you I got into all this XRP buyback stuff, I met Jimmy Valley, who leads that. And he's kind of given me a bunch of things, links, videos type things, kind of in this world of the state national thing, which I actually have mixed feelings about now, but a bunch of resources on how people are choosing to like escape this matrix system. And I don't know if you're old enough to remember these, but like when I was in college, they used to have these posters where it was like some weird geometric print. And if you stared at it like the right way, you kind of were able to relax your eyes, like this 3D unicorn thing would like pop out.
Oh yeah.
And at first, like it was really frustrating because you would like stare at it really, really hard. and you couldn't see it. But then if you just relaxed, you could see it. And then once you could see it, you can't unsee it.
That's right.
And that's, to me, is what a lot of the awakening is about, and seeing
It's a great analogy.
how much of this is even real, how much of this is like, I'm also not dismissing the idea that much of this is a simulation, and that this is a little bit like Avatar, where, you know, my body's here being controlled by something. Lately, I've had some weird stuff where people have said things to me that I would say to me as an inside joke, that like that person has no idea.
Wow.
And it's almost like me's trying to tell me, hey, this isn't real. Like,
wow.
Kind of. Now, I know that might be a little crazy and make me sound like,
no, nothing sounds crazy to me anymore.
But I'm starting to just question, like, how much of what we believe is reality is real. Because we're also taught as humans, like, if I can see it, it's real. If I can hear it, it's real. If I can smell it, it's real. But that's sort of part of about faith and spirituality, is like, you have to be open to things being real that you can't necessarily see or understand or prove at the time. Now, maybe later on you'll be able to prove them. And I'm not advocating like blind faith in something that doesn't feel right to you internally, but I'm a big depender on my intuition. And my subconscious has served me well for a very long time. And where does that guidance come from? I don't know. Does it come from God? Does it come from me up there in the spirit world, or some alien on another planet? Like, I don't know. There's something that is guiding me lately to this pretty crazy awakening process that's way beyond like Creature from Jekyll Island, the money system. It's more questioning, what is this reality? And if it is some kind of simulation, then you can just choose to not, you just ignore the rules. Do what you want. Now, don't go like killing people. And if you don't pay your taxes, there might be some kind of consequence. But a lot of the constructs that we're taught, you have to do all these things on certain days and follow these rules. I'm at the stage where I'm questioning a lot of these rules.
Being involved in the financial system, believe it or not, led me to realize that the markets were following the astrology. And as a Christian, growing up as a Christian, that was always a curse word. That was always something that you don't touch that, you don't look at that.
Yeah.
But that was part of my awakening path. And it led me to open up this whole other realm about astrology. We are in now the age of Aquarius, which has to do with awakening and revolution. So, and it has to do with the collective, becoming equal, becoming one. So we're seeing all these themes playing out. And my question was always like, do they follow the astrology and like make it plan out that way? Or is this just happening by default? There's always these questions that we have, like, does this make this happen, or does this just happen on its own, And I don't know that we'll ever know the answers.
I don't know. But another book that I actually read it on Kindle, so I can't show you, but it's this idea of trans surfing, which has nothing to do with like transgender business. It's more timelines theory, which is that every possible thing exists. And this is why I think manifesting is very real, because if every possible outcome is out there, your subconscious decides which path you go on, which is why the people who are what I'm going to call black-pilled and convinced that like the world is going to fall apart, that's going to be their reality. The people who are oblivious and think everyone loves, the government loves you, and they're going to not have any idea what's going to happen, they're going to go on that path. I'm consciously choosing like a Nasara type age of Aquarius, abundant era, where we go on to the other side and life is amazing. Like that's the timeline I'm going on. Wow. If this timeline thing is real and we do have the ability to select that, I'm going to put my energy into the best possible outcome.
And knowing that we are in the age of Aquarius now, I didn't believe before, because I was more darkened because of biblical beliefs. If you read the Bible in a certain way, or you're taught it in a certain way, you're taught to believe that we're going into tribulation that is just horrendous, and we're going to be enslaved by the mark of the beast.
Right.
Which was always taught in church as being a one world currency. And that's what I was going to ask you, to believe XRP will be a one world currency. And So I'm on, you know, a lot of those ideas are undoing in me. So now I'm leaning more towards, hey, then Nasara Jasara could happen actually, because it is in line with the age of Aquarius. And actually, if you know biblically, the years, we are actually at the year of the debt forgiveness. We're at the year biblically, because I believe the Bible is coded. I believe it's multidimensional. It's mystical.
Mhm.
And when you read it in religion, you read it as straight, you know, concrete, flat, one dimensional. But we are at that year mathematically, and we know numbers are very important,
Mhm.
that we're at a debt forgiveness. We're at the year of Jubilee where debt is forgiven. So, and just so happens to bring us to the age of Aquarius. Come on.
Yeah, perfect.
So what happens if we have a Nasara Jasara? What, in your belief, what happens in the world?
So this is what I've been told from some people who I speak with regularly who are have a lot of certainty that they know what this means. Their first thesis is that we are returning back to gold-backed money system. The money that has been stolen from all of us via taxation system and literally just theft, money that we don't even have words in English for, like King Solomon's money, the Chinese elder money, the Vatican money, has all been repatriated, if that's the word, like taken back, and will be distributed to the citizens of the world who are the rightful owners of that. My understanding is we are going, this sounds crazy saying it out loud. There'll be an event and we will get a phone call or something to say you have your appointment at this thing called an RV center, like a kind of like a bank that's been repurposed, and you will be taught or explained what your royalties are, what your money is that was stolen from you. And it's based on age. It's like prorated based on age. So the older you are, the more you get because you paid into the system more. So if you're a kid, you're not gonna get anything, but it's like 28, age 28 and older. And although they have some kind of thing that I don't know how this works, that they can tell if you're like a bad person, like if you are one of these cartel members who have been complicit in trafficking or dealing drugs or like doing other nefarious activities, that meeting might not go well for you.
Wow.
I've been told. And then you also need to be incredibly humble in this meeting and grateful, and don't like be a pain in the neck at all. It'd be a really bad idea to do that. And then we kind of enter this era where like money's different. Like right now, we are so programmed to like crave money and need money. You've got to save the money. I've got to figure out ways to make more money. And it's like where if you went out into the woods, so I'm in the mountains. So out my office window is a whole bunch of woods and there's tons of acorns out there. If I went and got a bunch of acorns, like you wouldn't care. Like if I wanted to get a whole pile of acorns, like you wouldn't care. If you wanted to go get acorns too, because there's just an abundant supply. So money would become something we don't look at the same way because the scarcity around it would be gone. But we all need to do things, and we would all be given the opportunity to like, what would you do with your time if money was no longer an issue?
Like to contribute to humanity with our
Yeah,
gift.
so the idea is we're all going to be given or volunteer for these humanitarian type projects, which are beneficial to society. Now, you could be a producer of things. You could make soap, you could make brownies, whatever. You could make food, or you could go and help impoverished people. You could help. I mean, there's like an infinite list of what these humanitarian projects are. And I don't limit yourself to what like a current nonprofit is. It's just more, I have this idea that would be beneficial to society. I'm going to go and do that. And because money is, nobody's going to have to work for money in the same way. You would get paid, but it would just be like gravy kind of thing. And the question then becomes, well, who's going to do all these crap jobs that nobody would do unless they needed the money? Right. This is why I think we've seen this massive thing with AI lately. Like it went from nothing to all of a sudden everywhere. I think AI is going to do a lot of these crappy jobs that nobody wants to do so that we can all be doing our cool humanitarian things and living a good life as free people.
Like clean toilets somehow.
I mean, I grew up watching the Jetsons. Like I've been waiting for that Rosie robot maid for a long time. So yes, Rosie the robot maid would come.
Wow.
There's also a lot of my understanding is that there's a lot of technology that exists that we don't know about that
I
would
believe
make those things not a big deal.
So basically, this is going to kick off from some major event in the world.
This is, again, that's what I've been told. There
Just
will
in this-
be kind of an EBS, this sort of broadcast system where we all have to go home. They're going to make the normies watch a bunch of videos to explain how we got here. And then
Wow.
you go to your meeting. This is also going to take a long time. Like, I'm explaining it like it's going to happen in a couple of days. I mean, like the span of it, but the programming we have is going to take a couple of generations to
Wow.
get out of. I mean, the way I like to look at it is we have lived in prison our entire life. Maximum security, brutal prison. And we've made the best of it. Like, I have a little prison business. I make little pictures and I sell those pictures for cigarettes, and I take the cigarettes and I go buy M&Ms with them at the prison store. I have a little prison economy and I have prison friends. And on Monday they have meatloaf, and on Wednesday they have tacos, and everything is, I'm just used to it, right? And then you come along and you tell me, hey, you're going to get out of prison. And I'm like, sweet. But then people are going to freak out because you don't know how to live outside of prison. And I'm like, do I get to still have my little pictures for cigarettes business? And we're going to have tacos on Wednesday. Like, and this is an analogy, but we're so programmed into this prison matrix system that it's going to take a while for people to like get used to this new world and not fighting with each other and not, feeling the scarcity around the money thing. So it's going to take a long time, I think, for like people to, people who've been tense their whole life, stressing about all the things you stress about, to literally let go and just feel free. It's going to be an amazing thing to go through. I think it's going to take a while though, especially the older you are. Like, we've had decades of this programming into us, and a lot of the bad things that, you go through this awakening about all the trafficking and horrible, violent things. People are it's gonna shock. Like, I'm assuming you did too. Like, we got to go through that on our own timeline, like our own like pace or whatever. If the stuff got overwhelming for me, even Jekyll Island, like, you could take a break and do other stuff and come back to it. What would happen in the beginning of this Nasara is all the people who are oblivious are going to be like like a fire hose to your face, learning all this stuff at once. And I think people are going to freak out.
Wow.
So,
Well, I mean, that does match up with because the age of Aquarius has to do with very rapid lightning speed awakening. So I could see something like that happening, and then a trickle effect where, what about Agenda 2030 and all the stuff that we hear from these entities? Do you think that they're connected to these events, but in a good way, or they're just going to be annihilated?
I think they're going to be removed. Now, this is where the timeline thing I think is interesting. I think it's removed on some timelines, but if you are convinced that Agenda 2030 is coming and you're sitting at home terrified of it, you will make decisions that align with that belief, and you could literally end up on that pathway. So I don't know if and I don't know enough about these timeline things to know if the Agenda 30 crowd would be removed from everywhere, or whether we're just going to collectively decide to go in the Age of Aquarius 1 and leave behind all of this negativity.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, more those that lean into the new age are actually manifesting in their own way a new earth to live through the heart, to live through love, and to awaken into that path. Whereas we're seeing other entities, just different timelines all over the place. So it's very interesting, what's about to happen, but we can all feel that sense of something culminating and something's about to happen and play out.
And for the last month, every weekend, someone's like, oh, it's going to happen this weekend. I'm like, okay. And it doesn't. Then we go, so this weekend. So it's like the whole Easter weekend is like, it's going to happen.
Oh.
Easter, what a perfect way to time it up with the rebirth. I'm like, okay.
And the resurrection, right?
Yeah. So there's
and the equinox, because that's really the new, I mean, we know the calendar is off and all of that, which has messed up our bodies. And
oh yeah. So
but what about XRP in that now? Will XRP be a one world currency? in this utopian, so to speak, age?
Here's
Like,
my
where
understanding.
does that tie in with the Nasara and all
There's
that?
going to be some phases. So in the beginning, each nation will have its own currency. XRP is a reserve currency for use for cross-border exchanges. So if you are Canada and I am Mexico, we're trading, I don't want Canadian dollars, you don't want Mexican pesos, so we use XRP to support those transactions.
Right.
Now, what eventually happens though is that it's kind of unnecessary at some point to always be swapping. If you're like, if I'm always going to need XRP to buy widgets, why don't I just hold the XRP? And that's when XRP becomes a store of value, where like if I've got a bunch of profit, I need to hold it somewhere. I'm going to need the XRP to buy stuff. Why not just hold it in XRP? And that's what a reserve currency is. It's where you would store value. And I do believe XRP will become a store of value currency. That's not really the same as one world currency where some central group decides this is the only currency you can use. A world reserve currency is like, hey, enough of us are using that it seems like a good place to store our wealth. And it's just easier to price things in XRP so that, you know, if I tell you, hey, you want to buy this box of oranges? Well, it's 4 pesos. And you're like, I don't think in pesos. How many is that in Canadian dollars? We as Americans are spoiled. We always think in dollars, but imagine other countries, like they've got to always convert. So that's what XRP could do, is it could become the thing that everybody prices stuff in just to keep it easier. And then eventually the other currencies just become like a hassle and you just price an XRP and pay an XRP. That I think could happen. What I've also been told is that this would happen for a while, like maybe a couple generations, like maybe 100 years. And then if humanity continues on this better path, the Age of Aquarius path, at some point we just don't really need money anymore. And money is a construct of the cartel that wanted us to be enslaved in this debt system. So if we don't really need that, then, you know, you have money like you have other random stuff that you kind of use but don't like need. Right. It becomes one of those things.
And you don't have to answer this, but believing that, would you ever sell any XRP?
Well, so I'm part of this buyback committee now, and I have discussions about this. I don't know if you're familiar with this idea that.
Yeah. Now, can I just interrupt you there? Because I saw the post yesterday that David Schwartz responded to, those 10 points, where he said, these are all true, that there would not be a buyback. One of them was, there will not be a buyback.
That is not, no. The thing said,
Clarify.
U.S. government will not buy back your XRP.
Okay.
Which I agree with. I don't think the U.S. government will buy back the XRP.
Gotcha.
There's a lot of what we call the counterparty. There's quite a few potential counterparties who could do it, could buy it. One thesis is that we could, as retail holders, we could get locked out of XRP. XRP is a payments currency that some people think countries will use it to trade with each other and banks will use it to trade with each other. We are not countries or banks, really. So if there was a marketplace where that value is exchanged and you need to have like an access card, an NFT to get into that marketplace, and we are not that, we could get locked out of that. If that were to happen, the best outcome for us is the buyback, where we are given gold or whatever, some kind of currency that we want in exchange for the XRP. So yeah, if you offered me like $10 billion for my XRP and it was in some kind of gold-backed currency, I can assure you that I would sell it.
Okay. I hold that concern that we're going to get locked out. My husband,
that was what Jimmy's
husband and I are like, we're like this with the, even with the SEC case, because part of me wants to take some profit if we see a spike from the SEC case, because who knows how this timeline is going to play out? How long are we going to have to wait, And we still have to live between now and then, and we still have to live for money between now and then, right? But he's like, he's just diehard.
Who is that?
My husband.
Oh, so I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong with taking profit. I think the only thing that Jimmy was, trying to help us all understand was that the government comes along. Let's say the price of XRP goes up to like $10, and people are like, "Oh my God, I've been holding this for years. Finally, I got some money." And the government comes along and says, "Hey, I got this deal for you. We're going to buy your XRP for $25. And people are like, "Oh my God, and
So
they
many miss
sell
out.
out. And really the actual value is going to be, $1 million a token. And you've sold all of it for $20 to find out that the fair market value is actually much higher. That was sort of the point, is like, don't assume if the government comes to you with an offer that it's actually a good deal. Taking profit on some, fine. But I'm not giving anyone advice, but I would be careful about selling all of it.
No. I just want a little bit, just a little bit.
Yeah. Because now here's the thing. If what Jimmy wants to do works, you wouldn't need a lot of it to have great wealth. And if Nasara comes, the buyback is just icing on the cake. And we're all going to live in this world where we don't have this thing about money that we currently do.
That would be just a whole other existence.
Right.
So if they do buy it back, right? Whoever this entity is going to buy it back, what do you, in US dollars, what do you believe? Where are you going with that? How, as far as the buyback, because you did just name a very large number. And I see many people out there saying that do study XRP and the whole realm of this, what we're talking about, you really don't need that much XRP. Do you believe that's true?
Think about it. If this is designed for nations to trade with each other, they don't buy like $50 worth of stuff. They're transacting millions and billions of dollars. It's just easier for them if XRP is worth a lot, then they don't have to have, there's also a finite supply. So if the global economy is quadrillions, there's only 100 billion XRP, you need, and people are going to use it to store value. They're going to pull it out of the circulating supply. You need a high price for that to work.
David also said that.
David said, now I have tremendous respect for David Schwartz. I'm not sure that Ripple is a friend of retail.
Correct.
And so when he says things, he's protecting his interests, which if they don't align with our interests, I'm not saying he's lying or anything, but I don't see, he's not on our side. I don't think he's on our side.
I just tweeted something about that, but it's funny that you said that, because many see him as a kind of a
hero,
a white hat, a hero. Many believe he's Satoshi or part of the Satoshi team.
He could be. But what we just talked about, Bitcoin wasn't really a thing that was for us to benefit from. It was a distraction.
Correct. Do you believe that Bitcoin holders will be wiped out before all of this happens? Do you think they're going to lose their money?
I don't know. I don't know if it's necessary for Bitcoin to go away, but I don't think Bitcoin is going to become something that's major. So
with it around almost $30,000 per one Bitcoin right now, that's an extraordinary amount of money, for Bitcoin to be worth. Could we see a major sell-off in Bitcoin as this plays out? Where's all that market cap going to go,
Yeah, I mean, the thing about Bitcoin and all currencies is people have this idea that Bitcoin is going to become worth a ton of money. So let's say you're a believer that Bitcoin is going to be worth $1 million. Why would you ever spend it? How much? Why would I pay, like, if I hired somebody to do something for me, why would I pay them in Bitcoin? It feels like dumb, right? If I'm going to pay you in a $30,000, like if I'm going to pay you $30,000 for something, if I had held that, I would have $1 million. So the fact that people believe it's going to appreciate in value a ton makes it difficult to use for payments. People will want to use, there's Gresham's law. There's one of these like financial laws, I'm blanking on it, where people will always use the shitty money first because you don't want to hold it. This is why if we see CBDCs, they'll probably get used because people will be like, well, I don't want to keep it. I'd rather get rid of this CBDC and go buy groceries with it and keep the good money, the gold. And I think that's worked against Bitcoin is people aren't spending it because they want to hold it for store of value. So Bitcoin could stick around as a store of value, but it's a risk though, because it's only a store of value if a lot of people agree that it's a store of value. Otherwise, I could go find some random rock in the ground and be like, this is a priceless stone. But unless you agree that it's a priceless stone, it's not really worth anything.
Well, based on belief. And I loved your video about beliefs.
Thank
and
you.
how, we form beliefs and collectively
Absolutely.
things hold value because we collectively believe they hold value.
I mean, gold is not any different. I mean, we just agree
Exactly.
as society that gold is worth a lot. Intrinsically, it's not worth any more than quartz. Like you need the same amount of labor to dig it up.
Right. And what does it really do for us, right?
It's shiny, pretty.
So one other question, do you believe there will be a flip of the switch that will just XRP will just be worth, go from wherever it is at that point to
I think there'll be a flip of the switch for the financial markets moving to the blockchain. Like you can't really have the stock markets run on two systems at the same time. It would just create this really messy arbitrage thing that would be chaotic. So we have the bond markets, the stock markets, the derivatives markets, all these financial markets that I still think will exist in some capacity, but they're going to have to go down and get rebooted in this new thing. That to me is part of the flip the switch, and XRP would be used for that. Now, if we have this NESARA thing I talked about, where the kind of EBS goes off, that would accompany this 10 days of darkness type thing where the markets go dead and they would get rebooted. So that NESARA does align with the flip the switch type thing. I kind of thought for a while we'd see this like banking collapse and it would be dramatic and that would predicate this. But I think the scope of what this new world will look like is so big that it can't all happen on one day. But I do think the financial markets could flip the switch, which would probably have an impact on assets like XRP.
Do you think the stock markets will have a scare?
I think, well, like an ICE 9 kind of thing.
Yeah, or where they would, and then there would be like, because of counterparty risk, there would be a big sell-off. And then they would shut it down.
Possibly.
And they
I
would
mean,
shut
that's what the ICE 9 Jim Rickards thing that he doesn't talk about anymore, even though it's in a bunch of his books. That there's sort of this collapse and they freeze everything to stop it from going to zero. And they lock everything up and do these bail-ins. Yeah, I still think that could happen. I thought that was going to happen a couple of weeks ago, like when Credit Suisse was going down. Like we're like, this is it, and then it doesn't. So I do think that if something is going to happen, like there's somebody who has decided when that is, and it's not going to just happen like on its own. There's like a plan.
I've seen the market go limit down, meaning that it drops so far and there's so many sell orders that there's no buyers.
Yeah.
And what they call a what do they call it? When your electric goes down and you whatever. Anyway, it makes it stop. It makes everything stop. I can't think of it.
Like the power goes out?
Yeah, and you have a switch that goes off and it actually helps the selling stop in the stock market, and it stops it, and then buys start happening again. So I'm wondering, maybe, are they going to just let go of all of those switches that allow that, and then everything shuts down? And they just let the bottom fall out, kind of get a scare happens, and boom, everything goes down.
I'm not sure how that's going to play out. One thing though that I'm just focused on myself is, I think it's less important to me how it all plays out, but just knowing that the current financial markets are so tied up with the cartel shenanigans that it's going to go dark. We're going to have a period where there isn't financial markets for a while. We kind of realize they're all made up anyway. And people who own equity and things, that's one thing, but this speculative, like gambling type thing that the financial markets are doing, I do think that we're going to leave that behind and wake up in a new system where company shares are bought and sold on an exchange, very likely something on Stellar blockchain. That seems like that was created for that. And we're just going to have a very different view about money and the money system and the financial markets. Right now, we're in prison, that we're used to this system that's in prison, and I'm trying to let go of the fact that the same thing won't exist outside of prison. It's just going to be different and in a good way. And I'm kind of excited to just be surprised a little bit and see how, I'm not worried at all about this other side. I think it's going to be great. The cartel that has oppressed us and enslaved us for hundreds and hundreds of years you can watch them, they're being taken out. That's amazing.
Awesome. Well, we appreciate you and the community, and I just appreciate all that you share and have
Thank
shared
you.
today with us today. Thank you for spending the time with us.
I
We'll see
appreciate
you
you
next
having
month.
me.
Thank you. So, have a good rest of your day.
You too. All
Okay.
right, take care.